Shalom, shalom. I wanted to share with you my study on First Peter chapter 1, verse 17. I see a connection between Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, the Akedah or the Akedah, and Hamashiach, Yeshua. Let's see if we can put this all together and let's see if you can see what I'm saying. Now, keep in mind, I'm using temple imagery, I'm using Jewish midrash, as well as the biblical text and historical resources and references. So, First Peter chapter 1, verse 17. If you invoke as Father the one who judges impartially according to each person's work, live in fear during the time of your exile. So we know that Kepha is writing to the Jews or the Yahudim who are in the diaspora or exile. You know that you were ransomed from the futile conduct inherited from your ancestors, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ or the blood of the Messiah, like that of a lamb without defect or blemish. He was destined before the foundation of the world, but was revealed at the end of the ages for your sake. Through him you have come to trust in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your trust and hope are in God. So we have the blood of Messiah that's like that of a lamb without defect or blemish. And this lamb was destined before the foundation of the world, but was revealed at the end of the age for your sake. Let's go to the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, and we're going to pick up at verse 15. Speaking about Yeshua again. Matter of fact, let's back up just a little bit more. Let's back up to chapter 9, verse 1. Now, the first covenant had regulations for worship, and an earthly sanctuary for a tent was constructed. The first one, in which were the lampstand, the table, the bread of the presence. This is called the holy place. Behind the second curtain was a tent called the Holy of Holies, and it stood the golden altar of incense and the ark of the covenant overlaid on all sides with gold, in which there were a golden urn holding the manna, and Aharon's rod that budded, and the tablets of the covenant. Above it were the cherubim of glory, overshadowing the mercy seat. Of these things we cannot speak now in detail. These preparations having thus been made, the priests go continually into the first tent to carry out the ritual duties. But only the high priest goes into the second, and he but once a year, and not without taking the blood that he offers for himself and for the sins committed unintentionally by the people. By this, the Holy Spirit indicates that the way into the sanctuary has not yet been disclosed as long as the first tent is still standing. Wait 1 second. Let's just back up. Only the high priest goes into the second, and he but once a year. What time of year is that? Once a year, the high priest goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur. Keep that in mind. It's going to be important to our study. So this is a symbol. What is a symbol? The first, the holy place and the Holy of Holies of the present time, indicating that gifts and sacrifices are offered that cannot perfect the conscience of the worshiper, but deal only with food and drink, various baptisms, regulations for the body imposed until the time comes to set things right. But when Messiah or Christ came as high priest of the good things that have come, then through the greater and more perfect tent, not made with hands, that is, not of this creation, he entered once for all into the holy place, not with the blood of goats and calves, but with his own blood, thus obtaining eternal redemption. For if the blood of goats and bulls and the sprinkling of the ashes of a heifer sanctifies those who have been defiled so that their flesh is purified, how much more will the blood of Messiah or Christ, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without blemish to God, purify our conscience from dead works to worship the living God? Now, notice that they've dealt with Yom Kippur, also the red heifer. For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that those who are called may receive the promised eternal inheritance, because a death has occurred that redeems them from the transgressions under the first covenant. Where a will is invoked, the death of the one who made it must be established. For will takes effect only at death, since it is not in force as long as the one who made it is alive. Hence, not even the first covenant was inaugurated without blood. For when every commandment had been told to all the people by Moshe Rabbanu, Moses, in accordance with the law, he took the blood of calves and goats with water and scarlet wool and hyssop, and sprinkled both the scroll itself and all the people, saying, "This is the blood of the covenant that God has ordained for you." And in the same way, he sprinkled with the blood both the tent and all the vessels used in worship. Indeed, under the law, under the Torah, almost everything is purified with blood. And without the shedding of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. Now, I've already clicked on this word because, like I said, I was doing this study and then I decided to share with you. This word, of course, some of us already remember this and know, is aphesis.
Aphesis.
Aphesis, which means pardon, forgiveness, letting go, dismissal, release, forgiveness, ascending out, point of departure, discharge, settlement, forgiveness, dispensation, acquittal, and liberation. Aphesis in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Pentateuch, the Torah, the Old Testament, as some say. Look at all these words it represents. But two of them stood out to me. This word aphesis is translated in the Greek Septuagint of the Hebrew Scriptures for doror, release of slaves, and yovel, jubilee. Ram, year of remission, Jubilee year. Why is that important? So this is why I'm saying, if we use historical sources, temple language, all that stuff, we get a better picture. So let me move here. All right, I'm going to knock this down and we're going to go to social justice in ancient Israel in the ancient Near East by Moshe Wainfeld. And he says, to proclaim liberty to the captives, in the opening of the prisons to those who are bound, they shall build up the ancient ruins. They shall repair the ruined cities, the devastation of many generations, the proclamation of freedom in scriptural language, the calling of Korah, of freedom, and we get that same word, the roar, was done by means of a proclamation of a royal figure. Is this starting to come together for you? Because we know that we know Yeshua is the king. The messenger who proclaims freedom in Isaiah 61:1, 52:7 is one appointed by God, upon whom the Holy Spirit rests, like the anointed king upon whom God's Spirit rests in Isaiah 11:2. Or he is a servant upon whom God, his king, places his spirit to establish justice in the land. A phrase which overlaps the Akkadian or the Akkadian, Misharum ina matim sakanum, and free those who are imprisoned, Isaiah 42:1-7. In the year 589-88 BCE, King Zedekiah proclaimed liberation in Jeremiah 34:8-11, as is well known. Even though the motivation of this proclamation was political, it may be that this proclamation took place during the Jubilee year, the year of liberation. If such was the case, then the year in which Cyrus ascended to power, which was also the year in which he declared the return to Sion, 539-38, occurred exactly 50 years following the year of liberation proclaimed by Zedekiah, which the prophet of comfort properly saw as the year of return to Sion. Jubilee. We're going to drop down. These proclamations of liberation were accompanied by special signs given to the people to signal the coming of freedom. It was customary in Israel to blow the shofar at the beginning of the year of liberation. Leviticus 25:10. We're going to look at that here in a minute. So that over the course of time, the blowing of the shofar became a symbol of freedom and liberation. Isaiah 27:13 conferred the benediction in the Jewish daily prayer in the Amidah, blow the great shofar for our freedom, which is placed next to the benediction of the establishment of the reign of righteousness and justice, the coming king. All right, here's where we start making even more connections with the ancient Near East. Similarly, it was customary in Mesopotamia to lift a torch as a sign of the proclamation of freedom, while in a permanent act of liberation, as distinguished from a one-time release, a pole was placed next to the gate of the city to which the rights of the freedom had been given, or next to the border of the territory which had been exempted from levies and taxes. In Egypt, where it was customary to free temple holdings from levies, the banner was placed next to the gate of the temple, while the Hittites placed a wooden pole next to the gate of a house which had been declared free of taxes. Well, we know the wages of sin is death. Yeshua was hung on a pole or tree outside of the city gates. Are we seeing the connection? The rising of the torch or of a pole, nes, that's the Hebrew word, also served in Israel as widespread means of communication. Let's look at Isaiah 11 and 12 real quick. I'm going to start at 10. On that day, the root of Jesse, who's the root of Jesse? Shall stand as a signal to the peoples. The nation shall inquire of him, and his dwelling shall be glorious. On that day, the Lord will again raise his hand to recover the remnant that is left of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the coastlands of the sea. He will raise a signal for the nations. And this word signal, Ness.
Nes.
And will assemble the outcasts of Israel and gather the dispersed of Yehuda or Judah and the four corners of the earth. The jealousy of Ephraim shall depart. The hostility of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not be jealous of Judah, and Judah shall not be hostile toward Ephraim. Let's go back to social justice. In certain scriptures, the pole serves as a symbol of freedom, its function being to inform captives, exiles, and imprisoned people of their liberation and return to their homes. Indeed, the primary purpose of freedom is the restoration of the individual to his home and to his inheritance. The Sumerian term for freedom, Margi, literally means return to the bosom of the mother, Amah. Isn't Jerusalem the mother of us all? Argi, which means return. Likewise, freedom is defined in Leviticus 25 as the return of each man to his property and to his family. In Egypt, proclamation of liberation begins with the statement that the prisoners and the guilty ones are to return to their cities, their homes, and their inheritance. Freedom, in the broad sense of the word, incorporates the following elements: the freeing of slaves and the debtors from their debts, pardon to prisoners and rebels, the release of captives and the return of exiles to their homeland, annulment of taxes, the restoration of estates to families, and the division of the land to the needy. It follows from this that the roar incorporated both political and economic freedom, i.e., freedom in the full sense of the word, freedom from political dictators and from creditors. Now, let's go to Luke. Let's go to Luke chapter 4. We're going to pick up at verse 18. Matter of fact, we're going to drop to 14 so we can, get some more context. Then Yeshua, or Yeshua Jesus, in the power of the Spirit, the Ruach, returned to Galilee, and a report about him spread through all the surrounding region. He began to teach in their synagogues and was praised by everyone. When he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day, on the Shabbat Yom, or Yom Shabbat. And as was his custom, he stood up to read. And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. Now, if we're paying attention, what is this? This is the reading of the Haftarah, the prophets, the Haftarah. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." That's Jubilee. And he rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. The eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him. Then he began to say to them, because now he has to expound on the text, "Today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." What? Now let's get some more information. Let's go to Leviticus 25:9. And then see if we can bring this thing full circle if you've been following. Leviticus 25. We're going to pick up at 8, matter of fact. "You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives 49 years. Then you shall have the trumpet sounded loud on the 10th day of the 7th month, which is on the Day of Atonement. You shall have the trumpet sounded throughout all your land. And you shall hallow the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty through the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall return every one of you to your property, and every one of you to your family. The 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow or reap the aftergrowth, or harvest the unpruned vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat only what the field itself produces." Okay. Now, we know that the trumpet is blown for the Jubilee on Yom Kippur. We also know that it's blown when? Rosh Hashanah. Kepha said that this lamb, or spotless lamb, was preordained before the foundations of the world. Where are we getting this from? Kepha's not only using temple imagery, he's also using Jewish midrash. But first, let's go to Genesis, because how is this all connected? Genesis 22, the location of the Akedah on Mount Moriah, is also where the temple was built. See these connections here? So according to Jewish tradition, this is the future site of the Temple Mount. 2 Chronicles 3:1. Let's go there real quick before we do anything. Let me see. Maybe I can go from here. Might be quicker. Yep. Let's go to 2 Chronicles 3:1 real quick. 3. Solomon began to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem on Mount Moriah, where the Lord had appeared to his father David, at the place that David had designated on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. Now let's see what this note says here. Let's get some more information because I got notes for days. They're everywhere. And here, the temple site, the land of Moriah, appears elsewhere only at Genesis 22:1 in connection with the Akedah, Abraham's binding of Isaac. Chronicles claims that David's altar was erected on the very spot on which Abraham prepared to sacrifice Isaac. Other allusions to Genesis chapter 22 includes the words, who was seen or appeared to David, Ra'ah, reminiscent of Genesis 22:4, 8, 13, and especially verse 14. Chronicles thus emphasizes the chosen nature of the temple site, which relates back to Israel's earliest forebearer, suggesting that the site's uniqueness is almost ontological. This may also be another expression of the fulfillment of the divine promise to Abraham. See 1 Chronicles 16, 8, 18. A rabbinic tradition further maintains that the locus of the temple altar was the place from which Adam was created and where Cain and Abel made their respective offerings, suggesting that the locus of humankind's creation is also the locus of atonement. That's a lot right there. But let's go back and let's go to Bereshit, Genesis 22. And everybody should know the story of the Akedah. But I want to get down here to verse, let me go to 9. 22 and 9. Genesis of Bereshit 22, verse 9. When it came to the place that God had showed him, Abraham built an altar there and laid the wood in order. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Keep in mind, they believed that Isaac was, what, about 30? Oh, right here. Our forefather Isaac was 37 years old when he was bound to the altar. And Abraham dwelt in the land of Philistines many days. These days were more than those he dwelt at Hebron. The latter were 25 years and the former 26 years. And this comes from Cedar Olam. Cedar Olam Rabbah. So he bound his son Isaac, laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then Abraham reached out his hand, took the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, Here I am, or Hanani. He said, Do not lay your hand on the boy or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Who is this angel of the Lord? Who is this Malach Adonai or Malach Adonai? Anyway, that's not the point. I just want to throw that in there. And Abraham looked up and saw a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called the place the Lord will provide, as it is said, on this day, on the mount of the Lord, it shall be provided. Let's get into some Jewish midrash and tie this together. What does the Akedah have to do with Hamashiach, with 1 Peter chapter 1? This is from the book Shadows of the Messiah. And this is volume 1, I believe. Yeah, volume 1 on Bereshit. Goes along with the Torah Parsha. So the resurrecting the ram, a ram caught in the thicket by his horns, Genesis 22:13. The sages say that God created Abraham's ram for this purpose during the first days of creation. In other words, the Almighty prepared Isaac's ram for sacrifice since the foundation of the world. In a similar way, the apostles call Yeshua the Lamb foreknown before the foundation of the world. 1 Peter 1:20. That's where we started. He is the lamb slain from the foundation of the world. The Midrash claims that the two horns of the ram became the two trumpets, the shofar of God. The Holy One, blessed be he, blew the first shofar at Mount Sinai on the occasion of the giving of the Torah as described in Exodus 19. He will sound the second one to herald the coming of Messiah. The shofar blown at Mount Sinai when the Torah was given came from the ram which had been sacrificed in place of Isaac. The left horn was blown for a shofar at Mount Sinai, and its right horn will be blown to herald the coming of Messiah. To herald, I'm sorry, the coming of Messiah. The right horn was larger than the left, and thus concerning the days of Messiah, it is written in Isaiah 27:13, on that day a great shofar will be blown. Perky D. Rabbi Eleazar, page 31. Rabbi Bechiah objected to this interpretation. Was not the ram burnt as a burnt offering, together with his horn, skin, and flesh, and olah? How could this be the source of the shofar that was blown at Mount Sinai? He went on to answer his own question, saying, the answer is that God created a new ram out of the ashes. How can the horn from Isaac's ram be the same horn that will herald the coming of Messiah if the ram was completely burned? God resurrected the ram. You see why Kepha is using the lamb or ram, either one, that was created or that was, what's the word they use here? Foreknown before the foundation of the world because of Yeshua's death, burial, and resurrection. And then the one ram's horn is blown on Rosh Hashanah, which Rosh Hashanah gives us 10 days until Jubilee. So this is also pointing to the second coming of the Messiah, which we know, I shouldn't say we know. I personally believe that he comes back on Rosh Hashanah with the trumpet and works his way from Mount Sinai to the gates of Jerusalem during the 10 days of Ah. And then Yom Kippur is that one of the great days. Hope this made a little bit of sense to you. Once you throw everything together, start putting pieces of the puzzle together, um, then the picture starts to become more clear and beautiful. Shalom, shalom.